In 2025, over 5% of U.S. workers are holding multiple jobs, the highest rate seen in more than a decade, yet companies still insist there aren't enough employees to fill open roles. Nearly 70% of remote employees now report feeling burned out, much of it driven by the expectation to stay connected long after the workday ends. Gig work continues to expand, with nearly 1 in 4 workers relying on contract or platform jobs instead of traditional employment. Despite these shifts, 92% of job postings still demand rigid 9 to 5 schedules, even for roles that could be done asynchronously. The old work model, built for a different era, is straining under the pressure of new realities. But before we can understand why this system is breaking down, we need to look at how it measures productivity in the first place. The productivity paradox. The productivity paradox is clear. Workers are spending more time at their desks than ever, but actual productive output has plateaued. Office professionals now average nearly 100 hours a week tied to work, much of it unpaid overtime, yet the hours logged rarely translate into meaningful results. The disconnect stems from a system built for assembly lines, not for the unpredictable cycles of creative or analytical work. Instead of focusing on what gets accomplished, most companies still fixate on how long employees appear to be working. Studies show many office workers spend significant unpaid hours on status updates, unnecessary meetings, and busy work designed to demonstrate activity rather than achieve outcomes. In some firms, employees devote nearly a third of their day to tasks that exist mainly to signal presence. This visibility work is a direct consequence of management practices that value time in the chair over real contributions. The legacy of the 40-hour workweek looms large. Ford Motor Company popularized the model to standardize factory output and attract talent, but its logic falters in knowledge sectors. Creative and technical roles don't produce value at a steady hourly rate. Instead, they require periods of deep focus and flexibility. Yet over 90% of job postings in 2025 still require office hours, even as remote and hybrid roles become more common. The result is a workforce performing for the clock, not for results. This misalignment comes at a cost. Research shows salary workers effectively donate thousands each year in unpaid hours, often responding to emails and messages well outside their scheduled shifts. At many organizations, employees now report working an extra 5 hours per week after official hours end, with no additional compensation. These expectations blur the boundaries between work and personal time, leading to chronic stress and burnout. Time-based tracking also warps incentives. Instead of rewarding efficient completion, it encourages stretching tasks to fill the day. Some companies have experimented with eliminating mandatory meetings or shifting to output-based goals, and the results are striking. Project completion rates rise, and employee satisfaction improves. Still, most businesses cling to traditional metrics, and middle managers spend over a third of their time policing attendance and timesheets, rather than supporting teams or driving innovation. Remote work has amplified these issues. Digital surveillance tools now monitor keystrokes and mouse movements, pushing employees to create the illusion of constant activity. Stories circulate of workers using gadgets to simulate computer use during breaks, just to avoid being labeled as idle. The emphasis on being always on has made it harder for people to disconnect, even when their work is done. The consequences extend to high performers as well. Those who finish their assignments quickly can't leave early or take on new challenges. Instead, they have to look busy until the workday ends. With real wages stagnating, efficiency is no longer rewarded with higher pay. So many turn to side jobs to supplement their income. This leaves workers stretched thin, dividing their attention across multiple roles and diminishing productivity in each one. The economic impact is massive. Time-based management now destroys over $1 trillion in potential productivity every year, simply by forcing people to work in ways that don't match the realities of their jobs. Outdated measurement systems keep businesses from realizing the full potential of their teams. As these pressures mount, workers are finding new ways to adapt. The rise of the portfolio worker. The rise of the portfolio worker has become one of the defining features of today's labor market. Instead of relying on a single employer, more workers are piecing together income from several sources: traditional jobs, contract gigs, and freelance platforms. In 2025, 5.2% of employed adults in the U.S. hold multiple jobs, the highest rate since 2009, and the trend is even more pronounced in certain regions and among women. This shift is not just about pursuing side interests. It's a response to the reality that one job often isn't enough to cover basic expenses. For many, the portfolio approach is a matter of necessity. Teachers, for example, frequently work well beyond standard hours, picking up tutoring or summer programs to supplement stagnant salaries. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has tracked a steady rise in educators and healthcare workers holding multiple part-time roles just to keep up with inflation. It's not just educators. Across IT, finance, healthcare, and marketing, highly skilled professionals are turning to contract work, remote consulting, and international freelancing to fill the gaps left by eroding benefits and flat wages. This fragmentation of work is reflected in tax records. Since 2022, there's been a notable increase in Americans filing both W-2 and 1099 forms, indicating a blend of traditional employment and self-employment. Workers are forced to monetize hobbies, technical skills, and even personal interests just to afford insurance premiums or cover rising deductibles. The economic math has shifted. Today, the average worker needs nearly 3 income sources to match the purchasing power of a single job in the 1990s. Consider the case of a marketing manager whose $75,000 salary covers the mortgage and car payments. To pay for childcare and groceries, he consults on the side, bringing in another $30,000. Any remaining debt, like student loans, is chipped away by flipping collectibles online. This constant juggling creates a precarious financial structure. If any income stream falters, the entire arrangement is at risk. The platforms that facilitate this patchwork of jobs often extract a significant share. Freelance sites can take up to 20% of earnings, while rideshare drivers typically keep only about half of their fares after expenses. Still, workers tolerate these cuts because traditional employment no longer guarantees a living wage or stable benefits. The gig economy has become a $1.2 trillion force, with over a third of the workforce participating, projected to reach half within 5 years. Household dynamics have changed as well. Dual-income families now routinely manage 4 or more sources of income, with both partners taking on several roles to make ends meet. Parents describe schedules packed with full-time jobs, freelance projects, and weekend gigs, yet still struggle to save for emergencies or future expenses. Younger workers, in particular, approach employment like building a diversified investment portfolio, assembling multiple roles to hedge against instability. But this new model comes with real risks. Gig work offers no unemployment protection, retirement benefits, or paid leave. Administrative burdens grow. Workers spend hours each month tracking income and taxes. Pay is unpredictable. More than half of gig workers report income swings of over 40% from week to week, making it nearly impossible to budget. Corporations have adapted by shifting more roles to contract status, avoiding the cost of benefits and long-term commitments. In 2025, Fortune 500 companies now have more contractors per direct hire than ever before. Many skilled professionals earn higher hourly rates as contractors, but pay more for health insurance and lose out on retirement contributions and job security. What began as a way to earn extra money has become the primary survival strategy for millions. Most don't prefer this fragmented reality. They adapt because the old promise of stability and shared prosperity has eroded. As more workers build their own safety nets, the gap between how people work and how companies manage them continues to widen. The Great Disconnect. A growing rift defines today's workplace, the Great Disconnect. Companies continue to enforce rigid 9-to-5 schedules, with 92% of job postings in 2025 demanding fixed availability, even for positions that could be performed asynchronously. Workers, meanwhile, increasingly seek autonomy over when and how they work, rejecting outdated expectations in favor of flexibility and results. This fundamental mismatch is not just an inconvenience. It's a source of lost productivity, wasted talent, and rising frustration on both sides. Generational differences make this divide even sharper. In many offices, baby boomer managers, averaging 59 years old, oversee Gen Z teams whose average age is just 26. These two groups often have fundamentally different ideas about what work should look like. Many older managers equate physical presence with commitment, while younger employees prioritize output and work-life balance. The consequences are real. One marketing firm saw 40% of its top performers leave within 3 months after leadership refused to try a 4-day workweek. Those employees quickly found roles elsewhere that offered the flexibility they valued. Technology, especially AI and automation, has rendered many fixed schedules obsolete. For 63% of white-collar roles, work can now be completed whenever it fits best. Creative and analytical tasks like coding, design, or data analysis happen in unpredictable bursts, not steady increments. Still, organizations cling to time blocks and face time requirements. One financial analyst described working through the night when inspiration struck, then spending the day pretending to be active just to satisfy management's expectations. A lack of trust fuels the disconnect. Despite 89% of remote workers reporting higher job satisfaction, 71% of executives express doubts about their productivity. This productivity paranoia leads to invasive monitoring, tracking keystrokes, monitoring mouse movements, and requiring webcams to be on at all times. In response, employees find ways to game these systems, such as keeping presentations open or simulating activity purely for appearances. The skills mismatch is another symptom of the disconnect. Employers post help-wanted signs but demand qualifications that few candidates possess, rarely offering training to bridge the gap. Job descriptions often list unrealistic requirements, while hiring managers complain about a lack of suitable applicants. One tech startup spent half a year searching for a developer with a decade of quantum computing experience, a role no one in the market could fill. Financial consequences for companies are substantial. Organizations that refuse to adapt face 43% higher turnover costs, as employees leave for workplaces with more modern approaches. Replacing a single employee can cost up to 1.5 times their annual salary, draining resources and disrupting teams. Meanwhile, policies that force employees back to the office often backfire. 3 out of 4 companies struggle to enforce these mandates, and some have lost 80% of staff when pushing rigid attendance rules. Even when workers comply, remote employees are 35% more likely to be laid off, pushing many to return to the office not for productivity, but for job security. Parents feel the impact of inflexible schedules most acutely. School hours remain unchanged, but work demands have increased, creating impossible conflicts. Many working parents report hiding family obligations to avoid penalties, or inventing appointments to leave work early for childcare. The system punishes honesty and forces families to operate in a constant state of stress. Middle managers, caught in the middle, spend hours enforcing outdated rules instead of focusing on meaningful work. Time that could go to supporting teams or driving projects is lost to monitoring attendance, tracking logins, and policing compliance. While some organizations have started to embrace asynchronous work, reporting higher productivity and lower turnover, they remain the minority. Most companies continue to measure hours instead of outcomes, clinging to assumptions that no longer fit the realities of modern work. Until this disconnect is addressed, businesses will keep losing talent and missing out on innovation. All of these pressures are compounded by another persistent problem. Workers are producing more, but the rewards have failed to keep up. Wage stagnation's vicious cycle. Wage stagnation has become a cycle that traps workers and undermines the promise of steady employment. Over the past several years, productivity has continued to rise, but real wage growth has barely kept pace with inflation. Between 2019 and 2024, wages at the 10th percentile rose by just over 15%, while prices increased by more than 21%. For many, paychecks stretch less each year, even as they deliver more output. This gap is not just a statistical quirk, it shapes daily life for millions. Employers often focus on hiring new talent rather than rewarding loyalty. Companies now spend significantly more on signing bonuses for new hires than on raises for existing staff. As a result, workers who stay put face what's known as the loyalty penalty. Those who switch jobs see pay increases averaging 14% higher than those who remain. This pattern encourages constant job hopping, not because people want to leave, but because it's the only reliable way to improve their financial situation. Surveys show that a quarter of workers are actively seeking new jobs just to reduce financial stress. Benefits, once a key part of compensation, have lost much of their real value. While employers report that benefits represent a growing share of total compensation, workers often find them inadequate. Healthcare costs have risen sharply. Premiums up nearly 50% since 2020, while wage growth lags far behind. Many employees pay high premiums and deductibles, leaving them effectively uninsured for all but catastrophic events. Student loan assistance remains rare, even though a large share of the workforce carries significant debt. The gender pay gap continues to reinforce wage stagnation. Men are still more likely to receive raises and get larger increases when they do. 64% of men reported salary bumps last year, compared to 55% of women. The average raise for men was 4.8%, while for women it was just 2.7%. This persistent gap means women continue to earn about 16% less than men for full-time work, limiting financial progress for millions of households. Financial stress is now a constant for most workers. Nearly 3/4 of U.S. employees report struggling to afford anything beyond the basics. Rising housing costs, higher prices for essentials, and the inability to save for emergencies are the main pressures. More than a third of workers say this financial strain leaves them less motivated at work, and a growing number are prioritizing side income over their primary roles. Even those with decent salaries often find themselves taking on extra gigs just to cover routine expenses. The mismatch between wages and the cost of living forces workers to make difficult trade-offs. Essentials like childcare now consume a much larger share of household income than in previous decades, and retirement savings are often sacrificed to meet immediate needs. Many professionals, even those earning above the median, supplement their income with gig work or freelance projects to keep up with bills and debts. Despite these realities, many employers remain detached from the daily struggles of their workforce. Half of employees say company leadership doesn't understand the financial pressures they face. While workers increasingly ask for meaningful benefits and clear paths to advancement, companies often respond with generic perks that do little to address core concerns. This disconnect only deepens the frustration and erodes trust. The roots of wage stagnation stretch back decades, with productivity gains far outpacing compensation. In some sectors, the problem is especially acute. Retail workers have seen real wages drop even as corporate profits rise, and warehouse staff now process far more packages for little additional pay. The old model, where loyalty and experience promised rising wages, has broken down. Workers today must choose between accepting flat pay or chasing better offers elsewhere, a cycle that drives up turnover and costs businesses in the long run. Some organizations are experimenting with solutions, such as transparent pay scales and automatic cost of living adjustments, but these remain the exception. Most continue to rely on outdated compensation strategies, even as workers look for alternatives. As the traditional employment bargain unravels, many are turning to new forms of work in search of greater flexibility and control. Gig economy's double-edged sword. The gig economy has become a defining feature of modern work, offering both opportunity and risk. On the surface, platforms promise flexibility and autonomy, but for many, that freedom comes with significant trade-offs. Nearly 1 in 5 workers now relies on gig jobs, a figure that has grown sharply in recent years. Yet behind the rapid expansion, the reality is far more complicated. Income instability is one of the most pressing issues. More than half of gig workers, 58%, report weekly pay swings of 40% or more. One week might bring in enough to cover rent and groceries. The next, hours worked and effort remain the same, but earnings drop by hundreds of dollars. This volatility makes it nearly impossible to plan for regular expenses or build any sense of financial security. For many, the constant uncertainty leads to a cycle of chasing the next job, leaving little time for skill development or long-term growth. Much of this unpredictability is driven by platform algorithms. Dynamic pricing models, designed to maximize efficiency for companies, create what workers describe as algorithmic anxiety. Pay rates can spike and vanish within minutes, and job offers appear and disappear without warning. A delivery driver might see a $12 order drop to $4 before they can accept it, and there's no transparency about how these decisions are made. Workers are left racing against rules they can't see or control, adding another layer of stress to already unstable work. Administrative burdens further erode the benefits of gig work. Independent contractors spend around 15 hours each month on taxes, invoicing, and paperwork, far more than traditional employees. Keeping track of multiple income streams, receipts, and quarterly payments takes time that could otherwise be spent earning. These hidden costs often go unrecognized, but they add up quickly and reduce the effective hourly rate for gig workers. Benefits gaps present another serious challenge. Without employer-sponsored health insurance or paid time off, gig workers face higher out-of-pocket expenses. Health coverage costs an average of 47% more for independent workers, and most lack retirement savings or paid leave. For many, every dollar earned goes straight to immediate bills, leaving nothing for the future. Workers in this system are one unexpected expense away from financial crisis. The gender pay gap persists in the gig economy as well. Women earn roughly 30% less than men on these platforms, in part due to caregiving responsibilities that limit their ability to take last-minute or surge-price jobs. Safety concerns and the risk of gender-based violence add another layer of difficulty for female gig workers, especially in roles that require late hours or travel. Even highly skilled freelancers encounter instability. While some command high hourly rates, contracts can end abruptly with little warning. A tech consultant may bill $150 an hour one month and spend the next searching for new clients. Companies benefit from this setup, gaining access to specialized talent without the obligations of full-time employment. When projects dry up, workers are left without a safety net. The physical and psychological tolls are significant. Gig workers, especially in transportation and delivery, face higher rates of workplace injury and often lack adequate insurance to cover medical expenses. The constant need to maintain high ratings, adapt to changing algorithms, and juggle multiple platforms creates sustained stress. Many report that falling below a certain rating threshold can mean losing access to work entirely. Some try to manage risk by working on several platforms at once, but this only introduces new complications. Competing apps may send workers in opposite directions, and penalties for declined jobs can further reduce earnings. The administrative load increases, and the unpredictability remains. Policy responses have not kept pace with these changes. Only a small fraction of gig workers have any form of collective bargaining or portable benefits. New forms of worker organization are emerging, but most lack real leverage to negotiate for better terms or protections. The gig economy now contributes over $1 trillion to the U.S. economy, and its influence will only grow. For companies, the model offers clear advantages. For workers, the promise of autonomy often comes at the cost of security and stability. As this system becomes more entrenched, the risks and burdens increasingly fall on those least able to absorb them, setting the stage for even deeper changes in how work is structured. The contractor trap. Companies are increasingly relying on contractors as a core part of their workforce strategy. In 2025, the contractor-to-employee ratio among Fortune 500 firms has doubled compared to just 5 years ago, now standing at 1.4 contractors for every direct hire. This shift allows businesses to cut expenses, saving around 30% per headcount by sidestepping benefits and payroll taxes, while scaling operations up or down as needed. For workers, though, these savings come at a steep cost. The contractor trap often starts with the promise of higher hourly pay. A software developer might earn $85 an hour as a contractor, but after paying $1,800 a month for health insurance and missing out on retirement matching, the real advantage fades. Contractors must shoulder expenses that full-time employees rarely see. Health coverage alone is typically 47% more expensive, and retirement savings lag far behind due to the absence of employer contributions. One IT contractor, after 2 decades of project work, had managed to save less than half what his employee peers had for retirement. Permatemp arrangements are now common. More than a third of contractors remain with the same company for over 2 years, sometimes doing the same work as full-time staff, but without the same protections or benefits. A marketing specialist described spending 3 years at a tech firm as a contractor, sitting beside employees who received stock options and paid parental leave, while she was left to manage her own retirement and health care. These long-term arrangements blur the line between temporary and permanent work, yet contractors remain excluded from the security and advancement opportunities that employees expect. The financial stress of contracting is real. 28% of long-term contractors report stress levels twice as high as traditional employees, driven by unpredictable income, lack of benefits, and constant concern over job security. Contractors average nearly 47 hours of work per week, more than their employee counterparts, but without the safety net of unemployment insurance or severance pay. Many face abrupt terminations, sometimes receiving notice only after their system access has been revoked. Companies structure contracts to avoid triggering legal obligations. 11-month terms with required breaks are common, designed to prevent contractors from qualifying for benefits or legal protections tied to tenure. This cycle of let go and rehire leaves workers in a permanent state of precarity. In manufacturing and healthcare, the effects are pronounced. Contractors earn less per hour and receive no benefits, even when doing identical work to employees. Productivity metrics show contractors work faster, likely out of fear that any slowdown could cost them their next contract. Legal scrutiny is increasing. New IRS guidelines have tripled the likelihood of misclassification audits, targeting companies that treat contractors like employees without providing mandated benefits. Some states have passed strict laws defining who qualifies as an employee, but enforcement varies, and companies often push the boundaries by requiring contractors to form LLCs or accept unfavorable terms just to keep working. While some workers choose contract roles for flexibility or higher short-term pay, the long-term drawbacks are clear. Contract gaps appear as unemployment resumes, making it harder to transition to full-time roles or negotiate fair salaries. Career progression stalls, with contractors often excluded from training and advancement opportunities. In tech and healthcare, entire departments now operate with more contractors than employees, allowing firms to cut costs quickly when budgets tighten. Contractors are the first to lose hours or positions in a downturn. The contractor model has created a two-tier workforce. Employees enjoy relative security, benefits, and a path to advancement. Contractors, even those working side by side with employees, carry the risks: sudden termination, lack of benefits, and stagnant careers. Surveys show contractors experience higher stress, work longer hours, and worry constantly about their future. This system has fundamentally altered the experience of work, introducing new forms of instability and stress that extend beyond the job itself. As companies pursue flexibility and savings, the result is a workforce that remains perpetually on edge, uncertain about their next paycheck, their benefits, or their prospects. These pressures don't disappear at the end of the workday. They follow workers home, the always-on epidemic, and when they engage with their jobs to be constantly available hours has become a defining feature of work today, particularly for remote and hybrid employees. The so-called always-on epidemic is reshaping how people experience their jobs, erasing the boundaries that once separated work from personal life. Since the pandemic, remote workers now send 42% of their work messages outside of regular hours, more than double the rate from just a few years ago. This isn't just about the occasional late-night email. It's a shift toward a culture where employees feel compelled to respond at all hours, regardless of personal needs or time zones. Digital presenteeism is at the core of this problem. Employees check work devices an average of 22 times during non-work hours, often interrupting family meals, downtime, or even sleep. For many, the pressure is unspoken but deeply felt. One consultant described answering Slack messages at midnight for months, only to end up hospitalized with burnout. Her manager called it a failure of time management. But the real issue was the unrelenting expectation to be available, an expectation that rewards those who quietly sacrifice their personal time and penalizes anyone who tries to set boundaries. The fear of missing out or falling behind drives much of this behavior. 72% of workers worry that disconnecting will damage their career prospects. Some send emails at 11 p.m. or early Sunday morning to signal commitment, while others schedule messages for business hours to mask how late they're working. Managers often reinforce these habits, promoting employees who respond quickly after hours and quietly sidelining those who don't. One manager admitted, "If someone doesn't answer right away, I assume they're not fully invested." Technology amplifies the problem. Read receipts, typing indicators, and instant notifications create a sense of urgency that's hard to escape. Workers describe the anxiety of seeing a boss read a message late at night, then waiting for a reply before feeling able to relax. Some have started using scheduled send features to avoid appearing always on, even as they work through the evening. Middle managers feel the squeeze from both directions. They're expected to model responsiveness for their teams while also protecting them from burnout. Nearly 9 out of 10 report feeling trapped between leadership demands and the well-being of their staff. One director described waking up to dozens of overnight messages from executives, knowing that any delay in response could be seen as a lack of dedication. The toll is measurable. Sleep deprivation among knowledge workers has risen sharply, with doctors reporting more cases of stress-related health issues like heart palpitations and chronic tension. Therapists now see multiple clients from the same company dealing with burnout-induced insomnia. Productivity monitoring software has become a booming business, tracking every keystroke and mouse movement. Workers have developed elaborate workarounds, like setting up auto-clickers or scheduling fake activity, just to appear active while trying to rest. Parents and caregivers are hit especially hard. 70% of working mothers report answering messages during family dinners, compared to less than half of fathers. One single mother described helping her child with homework while typing meeting notes, unable to explain why she was always on her phone. The expectation to be available never really ends, and the emotional cost is significant. Unpaid overtime is now routine. Professionals average more than 5 extra hours a week responding to after-hours messages, adding up to thousands of dollars in uncompensated labor each year. Employers often justify this by saying salaries cover whatever it takes, but the reality is a growing pool of workers stretched thin by constant demands. Some organizations have begun experimenting with boundaries. No message periods after 6 p.m., scheduled send tools, or explicit policies to protect personal time. The impact is clear. Teams with defined off hours report higher job satisfaction and fewer errors. Yet only a small minority of companies have formalized these protections. Without real change, the always-on culture will only intensify, fueling more stress and eroding the sense of security that once defined stable work. For many, the costs are no longer just professional, they're personal, affecting everything from sleep to family life. This relentless pressure is only one part of a larger squeeze affecting workers across the spectrum. The middle-class squeeze. For many professionals, the reality of the middle class in 2025 is defined by mounting financial strain and diminishing returns on hard work. Salaried workers now average over 5 hours of unpaid overtime each week, a jump from just a few years ago. This extra labor, once considered rare, is now routine, effectively lowering hourly pay and eating into personal time. 4. Someone earning $75,000, that's thousands of dollars in lost income each year, with no additional security to show for it. Consider the licensed architect in Chicago, whose degree was meant to guarantee stability. Instead, she now delivers food at night to cover student loan payments that dwarf her take-home pay. Childcare expenses have surged, now consuming more than a quarter of the average household's income. For dual-income families, the cost is often higher than their mortgage, forcing difficult decisions about whether it even makes sense for both parents to work. Many find themselves caught in a gap, earning too much to qualify for assistance, but not enough to build savings or move ahead. One parent brings home just a fraction of her paycheck after taxes and daycare, yet quitting isn't an option without sacrificing the family's financial footing. Retirement security is slipping further out of reach. Many workers have stopped contributing to 401k plans, prioritizing immediate bills over long-term savings. Participation rates are falling, and financial planners warn of a looming crisis as a generation approaches retirement with little to no cushion. Younger professionals, squeezed by housing costs and debt, often put off saving entirely, knowing their current expenses leave nothing left at the end of the month. The traditional 9-to-5 schedule no longer guarantees stability for those in mid-level roles. Teachers, nurses, and managers earn salaries that look respectable on paper but fall short in practice, especially in cities where living costs have soared. A Denver public school teacher with a master's degree still needs roommates to afford rent after student loan payments. Many professionals are overqualified for gig work but lack the specialized skills needed to command premium freelance rates, leaving them stuck in roles that don't provide real upward mobility. The gender pay gap compounds these pressures. Women continue to earn less than men for the same work and are less likely to receive raises or significant salary increases. Over time, the disparity widens, affecting everything from homeownership to retirement savings. Female professionals watch male colleagues advance more quickly, with the income gap translating into tangible differences in quality of life and security. Financial stress is now a constant feature of middle-class life. Most workers report struggling to afford anything beyond basic needs, with little left over for emergencies, let alone long-term goals. Motivation suffers as a result. Many admit to focusing more on side income than excelling in their main job, and some have stopped trying to go above and beyond at work. The cost of housing is a major factor. More than a third of workers can't afford to buy homes where they live, and those who do often sacrifice retirement contributions just to make mortgage payments. Turning to gig work for relief offers little improvement. While a handful of highly skilled freelancers earn impressive rates, most middle-class professionals find the pay on platforms underwhelming once benefits and downtime are factored in. Income swings wildly from month to month, and the lack of predictability makes financial planning nearly impossible. Benefits packages, once a key part of middle-class security, have lost ground to rising costs. Health insurance premiums have jumped nearly 50% since 2020, far outpacing wage growth. Workers now pay more for less coverage, with high deductibles leaving many effectively uninsured for everyday needs. Employers continue to tout the value of benefits, but employees increasingly see them as insufficient or out of reach. The result is a cycle where professionals work longer hours for stagnant pay, leaving little time or energy for the skill development that might help them advance. Burnout rises, engagement falls, and the promise of steady progress up the career ladder feels more out of reach than ever. Under these conditions, workers begin to question not just how much they're paid, but whether the work itself is valued at all. The productivity theater. In many workplaces, the focus has quietly shifted from real productivity to performing the appearance of work. This phenomenon, often called productivity theater, has become the default mode for millions of knowledge workers. According to a 2025 McKinsey study, employees are genuinely productive for just over 3 hours each day, yet are required to remain at their desks for more than 8. The rest of the time is filled with what's known as visibility work, activities that make workers look busy but contribute little to actual progress. On average, knowledge workers now spend nearly a third of their day on performative tasks like unnecessary meetings, endless email chains, and routine status updates that don't advance any project. The cost of these rituals is clear when companies experiment with change. One bank eliminated all non-essential meetings for 3 months and saw a 29% increase in completed projects, without requiring anyone to work longer hours. Yet, when the trial ended, the old routines quickly returned. Employees explained that leadership was more comfortable seeing people in conference rooms, even if it meant less real progress. This attachment to visible busyness runs deep, shaping not just how people work, but how managers measure value. Workplace design often amplifies the problem. Open-plan offices, intended to foster collaboration, actually reduce focused work time by more than 2 hours each day due to constant interruptions and background noise. Employees develop strategies to cope. One programmer listens to white noise on headphones while appearing to concentrate on work, secretly watching tutorials. Others keep several spreadsheets open to quickly switch screens when someone approaches. These behaviors aren't about laziness. They're about managing perceptions in an environment where being seen matters more than what gets done. The pressure to appear busy leads to widespread disengagement. A recent survey found that 68% of workers admit to coasting during slow periods, doing the bare minimum to avoid drawing attention. Many have learned that finishing work early doesn't lead to recognition, but simply results in more assignments for the same pay. One marketing specialist described stretching out simple tasks to fill the day, knowing that any sign of extra time would just invite more busy work. Middle managers, caught in the middle, spend over a third of their own time monitoring attendance and activity logs instead of supporting their teams or focusing on results. One team lead confessed to tracking virtual desk time metrics, even though he knew they were meaningless. The pressure from above to show that teams are busy creates a feedback loop, reinforcing a culture where visible effort is valued over meaningful outcomes. This system takes a toll on workers. Salaried employees now contribute thousands of dollars in unpaid overtime each year, much of it spent on low-value tasks or after-hours responses that go unrecognized. Employers often justify this by claiming that a salary covers whatever it takes, but the reality is that much of this effort is wasted. One analyst described spending weekends on detailed reports that were never read, simply because a senior executive requested them. Digital surveillance tools have made productivity theater even more elaborate. Companies increasingly track keystrokes, mouse movements, and screen time to ensure employees appear active. Workers respond by developing workarounds, like placing weights on keyboards or using mouse jigglers, to keep their status green during slow periods. These tactics highlight just how much energy is spent on maintaining appearances rather than delivering results. The economic impact is staggering. Relying on time-based metrics and visibility, work costs the economy more than $1 trillion in lost productivity each year. Hours are wasted, projects are delayed, and innovation stalls as teams focus on looking busy instead of solving real problems. Even companies that recognize the issue struggle to break free. Attempts to shift to output-based management often meet resistance from middle managers who feel they lose control without visible proof of effort. Despite the clear drawbacks, most organizations continue to measure hours and activity rather than results. It's easier to count time at a desk than to evaluate the quality of ideas or the impact of work. Until this mindset changes, productivity theater will remain a costly fixture of modern employment, one that drains morale, wastes resources, and leaves workers questioning the value of what they're really getting in return. The same logic that drives this focus on appearances also shapes how companies present their benefits, promising more on paper than they deliver in practice. The Benefits Mirage. Rising costs have quietly undermined the real value of employer benefits, leaving many workers with far less security than their pay stubs suggest. Healthcare premiums have climbed much faster than wages. One worker now pays $1,200 each month for family coverage with an $8,000 deductible, consuming nearly a fifth of pre-tax income. Despite this, employers still point to these packages as evidence of their competitiveness. For many, the numbers simply don't add up. Insurance is available, but actually using it can mean financial hardship. This mismatch between what benefits cost and what employees actually need keeps getting wider. Only a small fraction of companies offer student loan assistance, even though a significant share of workers, especially recent graduates, say it's their top priority. One teacher puts $900 toward loans every month while her employer offers fertility benefits she can't afford to use. Tech companies highlight perks like free snacks, but skip on retirement matching. Manufacturers promote wellness programs, yet cut back on essentials like safety gear. Across industries, the benefits that look good in a brochure often miss the mark in practice. Fear of being seen as replaceable has made employees reluctant to use the benefits they do have. Paid leave usage has dropped, with many workers, especially parents, returning to work long before their leave runs out. One mother, eligible for 12 weeks of leave, came back after just 2, worried that taking the full time would hurt her chances for promotion. The same anxiety keeps people from taking sick days, even when they need them. Nearly 2/3 of employees have skipped entitled time off to avoid appearing unreliable. The mental health toll is substantial. Over 1/3 of workers say the state of their compensation directly affects their mental health. One account manager describes panic attacks every year during benefits enrollment season, as premiums and deductibles rise but coverage shrinks. Some families have skipped necessary medications because meeting a high deductible would mean sacrificing other essentials. The idea of a comprehensive package turns hollow when employees feel trapped, needing insurance, but unable to afford care. Retirement benefits have also lost ground. More than half of workers want better retirement options, but less than 2 in 5 have access to any employer-matched plan. Even when matching is available, the required contributions are often out of reach. A warehouse worker notes that matching 3% would mean giving up money needed for groceries. Faced with immediate financial pressures, many simply stop contributing, and participation rates continue to slide. Benefit packages often ignore the reality that workers' needs change over time. Younger employees want help with student loans or childcare, while older workers focus on healthcare and retirement. Yet most companies offer generic, inflexible packages that leave both groups dissatisfied. Surveys show a majority of employees would even accept lower pay if benefits actually match their life stage, but few have that option. Wage stagnation only makes things worse. Health premiums now take up a much larger share of household income than they did a decade ago. Some families have dropped other forms of insurance just to keep up with healthcare costs. knowing that one unexpected bill could threaten their financial stability. For many, the choice is between essentials and coverage, with no good options. A handful of companies have tried to address these issues with customizable benefits, but most stick to traditional models that are easier to administer, even if they don't meet employee needs. HR budgets go to flashy wellness perks that see little use, while out-of-pocket costs for actual care keep rising. Employees notice the disconnect. Companies spend more on benefits than ever, but workers feel less secure and less valued. This growing gap between what's promised and what's delivered leaves employees frustrated and disengaged. Many now prefer higher salaries over complex benefits, choosing cash they can control rather than relying on employer safety nets that no longer provide real protection. Until organizations align their offerings with what workers truly need, the sense of security that benefits once provided will continue to erode. As workers try to navigate these trade-offs, another set of challenges emerges, especially for those whose jobs have shifted to remote or hybrid arrangements. The remote work paradox. Remote work has introduced a new set of contradictions for today's workforce. The promise was greater freedom and flexibility, but the reality is more complex. Hybrid work now dominates, with most professionals splitting their time between home and the office. Stanford research shows that the typical hybrid schedule is 3 days in office, 2 days remote, a setup that's popular for its balance of collaboration and focus. Yet, this flexibility often comes with hidden costs that reshape how work is experienced and rewarded. The most persistent challenge is proximity bias. Even as remote options expand, office-based employees remain more visible to leaders, and that visibility pays off. Data from millions of white-collar workers reveals that remote staff are promoted 31% less often than their in-office or hybrid peers. Executives admit the bias is real. 87% of CEOs say they're more likely to give raises and prime assignments to those they see in person. For remote workers, this means putting in equal or greater effort but missing out on advancement. One marketing manager described enduring a 3-hour daily commute just to be noticed, even though she could do her best work at home. The need for visibility shapes schedules, career paths, and even where people live. Hybrid work has become the norm across industries, but the distribution isn't equal. Middle managers are more likely to work remotely than executives, which creates a disconnect in how policies are set versus how they're lived. Decision makers often spend more time in the office, reinforcing the tendency to favor those who are physically present. One director admitted that when a big project comes up, he thinks first of the people he passes in the hallway, not the remote team members who may be just as capable. The time saved from not commuting rarely translates into true free time. Remote workers report checking messages and responding to emails outside standard hours, unable to fully disconnect. 76% say they work late or log extra hours at least once a week. The boundaries between work and home blur, and the convenience of remote work often results in more unpaid labor. One accountant noted that the hours saved from commuting simply get replaced by answering emails after dinner, with no real gain in personal time. Attempts to measure productivity in remote settings can backfire. Companies that use keystroke tracking or monitor login duration often find productivity drops as employees focus on appearing active rather than doing meaningful work. Associates log in for long stretches or schedule messages to send during business hours, all to satisfy metrics that capture activity but not results. These systems erode trust and encourage employees to game the system, rather than excel at their jobs. Remote work has clear upsides for diversity. Job postings that offer remote options attract 15% more women and 33% more applications from underrepresented minorities. However, the same workers who benefit from remote flexibility often encounter barriers to promotion and advancement. Companies recruit diverse talent with remote roles, then struggle to support their growth once hired. This gap undermines the broader goals of inclusion and equity. Despite these challenges, fully remote workers often report higher satisfaction and a strong desire to keep their arrangements. Over 30% of remote employees say they want to remain fully remote. Yet, without changes to how performance is measured and advancement is managed, the benefits of flexibility are offset by new forms of disadvantage. Some companies try to mandate office days to address these problems, but such policies can drive turnover and erode trust. as seen when a tech firm lost a dozen engineers in a single week after enforcing in-office attendance. The remote work paradox is clear. Workers gain flexibility, but risk losing visibility and opportunities for advancement. Companies save on real estate, but often lose productivity to surveillance and ineffective metrics. Until organizations find ways to evaluate remote staff fairly and respect boundaries, the potential of remote work will remain limited. The modern office hasn't vanished. It's simply expanded into every part of daily life, bringing with it both new freedoms and new forms of pressure. These shifts are changing not just how people work, but how they think about loyalty and long-term commitment to any single employer. The loyalty extinction. Loyalty as a workplace value is fading fast. The median job tenure has fallen to just 2.7 years, down from 4.1 years in 2020, marking a dramatic shift away from long-term employment. Workers now see frequent job changes as a smart strategy rather than a red flag. One engineer multiplied his salary fivefold in just 3 years by moving between 4 companies. The numbers back up this approach. Job hoppers in 2025 earn 14% more than those who stay put, making loyalty seem like a financial liability instead of an asset. Opportunities for advancement within a single company have dwindled. Internal promotions now account for only 18% of open roles, compared to 32% before the pandemic. This decline pushes employees to look elsewhere when they want to move up. A marketing manager recalled watching a position she helped train a junior forgo to an external hire at a much higher salary. When companies bypass their own talent, workers quickly learn that growth means looking outside. The old social contract between employer and employee has unraveled. Workers no longer expect security or a long-term relationship with their company. Instead, priorities have shifted. 85% would accept a pay cut for better work-life balance, and nearly a third would trade a raise for a shorter workweek or more paid time off. For many, personal time and well-being matter more than climbing a corporate ladder. An accountant described turning down a significant raise to secure a 4-day workweek, explaining that the extra day off was worth more to her than the money. This shift is most pronounced among younger generations. 62% of millennials are actively seeking new jobs, as are over half of Gen Z and Gen X workers. Even among those who stay, the mindset has changed. 44% admit they only remain in their current roles because of salary security, not satisfaction or loyalty. The job market's instability is a common refrain, especially among Gen Z, who see frequent moves as a way to hedge against uncertainty rather than a sign of disloyalty. Gender disparities persist and further erode commitment. Men are still more likely to receive raises and get larger increases than women, and the wage gap continues to widen over time. Women watch as male colleagues advance faster and accumulate wealth at a rate that shapes their entire financial future. These inequities compound the sense that staying loyal offers little reward. Companies themselves contribute to this churn. Stagnant wages, limited advancement, and the erosion of meaningful benefits all drive workers to keep their options open. Many employees now view their jobs as temporary stops, not destinations. The rise of gig work and side hustles accelerates this mindset, giving workers both a financial cushion and a fallback plan if their main job disappoints. Benefits that once tied people to a company, like healthcare, now consume a growing share of income, forcing families to make trade-offs that undermine any sense of security. Retention efforts, such as bonuses or training, rarely offset the broader trend. Most organizations still prioritize external hiring, even though replacing an employee costs far more than investing in current staff. Workers notice when companies accept high turnover as normal and respond by treating employment as transactional. Job hunting becomes a background activity, with employees applying for new roles during lunch breaks or before meetings. This new reality creates a strange tension. Companies lament high turnover, but do little to promote from within or reward loyalty. Workers chase better pay and conditions, but sacrifice stability and long-term growth. The mutual investment that once defined employment has given way to a short-term, contract-like relationship. With promotion rates down and tenure shrinking, the career ladder has been replaced by a series of stepping stones. Both sides adapt to constant churn, but the costs, both financial and psychological, are mounting. The consequences of this loyalty extinction reach beyond paychecks and promotions. As stability disappears and work becomes transactional, The pressures on workers intensify. The burnout economy, setting the stage. The burnout economy is now a defining feature of modern work. The numbers are stark. Work-related mental health claims have risen 217% since 2020, a clear sign that current systems are pushing people beyond their limits. This isn't just about stress. Physical symptoms are everywhere. Nearly half of workers report migraines, digestive issues, or heart palpitations linked directly to job pressure. Stories like Jason's, a product manager whose weekends dissolved into endless Slack notifications and late-night emails, are no longer outliers. They're the norm. Presenteeism, where employees show up but can't truly function, drains productivity and morale. Each year, it costs employers about $3,000 per worker in lost output. People go through the motions, drafting reports, attending meetings, answering emails, while feeling numb or exhausted. Clinics have seen a sharp rise in work-related insomnia since companies ramped up digital monitoring. Fatigue is so common that quiet quitting has become shorthand for survival, but the underlying toll is severe. A paralegal described staring at a screen for hours, unable to process information, yet feeling unable to step away. The always-on culture is a major driver of this crisis. Remote and hybrid workers check their devices dozens of times outside work hours, unable to fully disconnect. One consultant kept her laptop open during her daughter's birthday party, just in case, reflecting a broader trend where personal time is routinely interrupted by work demands. Surveillance technology, keystroke trackers, mouse movement monitors only intensifies the pressure. Employees adopt coping strategies like mouse jigglers or scheduling emails at odd hours to appear engaged, but these workarounds don't address the real problem. Physical health suffers alongside mental well-being. Emergency rooms now see more young adults with stress-induced conditions like shingles or chronic pain. Teachers and gig workers alike report repetitive strain injuries and tension-related ailments, but many lack adequate health care to treat these issues. In the gig economy, these problems are magnified. More than half of platform workers report pain from their work, yet few have access to employer-sponsored benefits or paid leave. Inequities persist. Women are 32% more likely than men to report high stress, often balancing caregiving with after-hours work. They receive 15% more after-hours requests and are more likely to sacrifice rest or personal time to keep up. One mother described silencing notifications during dinner, only to return to dozens of unread messages and a sense of falling behind. The structure of work continues to reinforce these disparities, with little support for those most affected. The financial impact of burnout is hard to ignore. Exhausted teams take longer to finish projects and make more mistakes. One tech company found that overworked employees needed days longer to complete tasks, while error rates surged among those logging unpaid overtime. Yet, organizational cultures still reward visible overwork, promoting those who answer midnight emails, not those who set healthy boundaries. Attempts to address burnout often miss the mark. Corporate wellness programs sometimes add to frustration, offering yoga classes or meditation apps while workloads remain unmanageable. Employees see through these gestures, recognizing that real change requires more than perks. Pilot programs show that structural changes, like banning after-hours emails or setting realistic deadlines, can reduce turnover and boost satisfaction, but most companies resist, fearing lost productivity. Younger workers are leading a quiet revolt. Gen Z and millennials increasingly reject roles that demand constant availability, prioritizing mental health and sustainable workloads over traditional markers of success. One Gen Z employee turned down a management promotion, citing the expectation of 24/7 responsiveness as a deal breaker. As these generations become the majority of the workforce, their preferences are reshaping expectations and forcing companies to reconsider outdated practices. The burnout economy extracts productivity at an unsustainable pace, treating people as endlessly renewable resources. Companies track every metric except employee exhaustion, missing the point that depleted teams generate less value over time. Some firms are starting to audit workloads and rethink expectations, but most still cling to the time clock mentality that defined earlier eras. This relentless extraction of effort is reaching a breaking point. As organizations struggle to maintain output, new forces are accelerating change in ways few can predict. The AI wildcard. Artificial intelligence is reshaping work in ways that no previous wave of technology has managed. AI isn't just automating repetitive tasks, it's redefining what counts as skilled labor and changing the rules of employment across industries. In law, finance, customer service, and even creative fields, software now completes tasks that once took teams of people. A law firm that once relied on a dozen paralegals now uses contract analysis software to review documents in minutes. The remaining staff spend their days explaining AI-generated changes rather than finding errors themselves. In customer service, chatbots handle the majority of inquiries, leaving humans to manage only the most complex or frustrating cases. The workload shifts, but pay and expectations rarely keep up. The pace of change is relentless. 41% of companies worldwide expect to reduce their workforces in the next 5 years due to AI and automation. The impact is most visible in jobs that follow clear procedures: bank tellers, junior accountants, insurance adjusters, where software can process information faster, more accurately, and at any hour. For those left behind, the new job often involves monitoring or correcting the machine's output, a role that feels temporary as AI continues to improve. Manufacturing plants that once employed dozens of quality inspectors now rely on vision systems to catch defects. Workers are asked to adapt, but the skills required are often narrowly focused on managing the very tools that are replacing them. For many, the promise of reskilling is thin. While the tech sector expects a surge in AI-related roles by 2030, the number of jobs lost to automation already outpaces those created. 82% of workers worry about being replaced by machines, but only a small fraction receive meaningful support to transition. Companies offer AI familiarization sessions, short courses, or online videos that explain the new software, while layoffs continue. Severance packages sometimes include access to the same free courses available to anyone, but few workers see a clear path to new roles. The message is clear: adapt on your own, or risk being left behind. Algorithmic management brings new pressures. Gig platforms use AI to allocate tasks, set pay rates, and rank workers. The process is efficient but opaque. A delivery driver might see a high-paying job disappear in seconds as the algorithm recalculates demand. Freelancers find themselves demoted if their response times lag, even if clients are satisfied. Income swings can be dramatic, with little warning or explanation. In the UK, campaigners have called out these black box systems for automating exploitation, demanding greater transparency in how decisions are made. Even highly skilled professionals are not immune. Marketing agencies deploy AI to generate campaign drafts, leaving copywriters to edit rather than create. The volume of work increases, but compensation rarely does. Agencies tout AI-enhanced creativity to clients while quietly reducing staff. In IT, cybersecurity, and data analysis, contract-based work is rising, with AI matching workers to projects based on skill profiles. This creates opportunities for those who can adapt, but also raises the bar for entry and increases competition. The lack of transparency and accountability in AI-driven workplaces creates new risks. Workers have little recourse when algorithms make mistakes or introduce bias. Hospitals use AI to transcribe doctors' notes, but errors persist, and there is often no formal system to correct them. Nurses and technicians report catching mistakes, but responsibility for fixing them is unclear. The pressure to trust the system is high, even when the consequences are serious. Generational divides shape how workers respond. Younger employees tend to embrace AI training, seeing it as essential for survival. Older staff are more likely to resist, doubting that new tools will secure their positions. Both groups face uncertainty as roles evolve or disappear. Workers who adapt may find themselves training their replacements, while those who hesitate risk being sidelined. The gig economy, with its rapid adoption of AI, offers a preview of what's coming for the broader workforce. Platforms advertise flexibility and opportunity, but the reality is intense competition, shifting rules, and growing insecurity. Workers race to keep up with algorithms that determine their pay and prospects, often with little human oversight. As AI continues to shape the future of work, the speed and scale of disruption are outpacing most policy responses. Companies and workers alike are searching for new ways to measure value and structure employment. Some organizations are beginning to experiment with different models, questioning whether the old assumptions about hours and output still make sense in an era defined by rapid technological change. The 4-day experiment. One of the clearest tests of new work models is the 4-day workweek. Despite growing interest, only 12% of companies offer compressed schedules in 2025. Most organizations continue to default to the 5-day week, even as mounting evidence shows that cutting hours doesn't mean cutting. Results. Trials of the 4-day model show that 61% of companies see productivity stay the same or improve. In one case, a tech startup dropped Fridays from the schedule and saw a 23% jump in revenue within 6 months. Employees finished the same amount of work in less time, with fewer interruptions and pointless meetings. When time is limited, focus improves, the CEO explained. Yet, the vast majority of business leaders remain hesitant, holding tight to the familiar structure of the workweek. Executive resistance is a major barrier. Nearly 4 out of 5 leaders cite cultural resistance as the main reason for rejecting the 4-day week. Many managers still equate physical presence with productivity and struggle to trust output they can't directly observe. One HR director at a Fortune 500 company described how leadership canceled a proposed pilot, fearing they'd lose oversight if people weren't at their desks. Even with data showing that companies with 4-day weeks have 32% lower turnover, many executives stick to what they know. The reluctance isn't about logistics, it's about mindset. The benefits of a shorter week go beyond output. Employees routinely report getting back unpaid overtime, sleeping more, and starting the week with real energy. A marketing firm that switched to 4-day weeks saw burnout claims fall by 41%. At a manufacturing plant, workers gained over 5 extra hours of rest per week without reducing output. For many, having a weekday off means time for errands and appointments, so weekends become true downtime instead of catch-up days. Middle management often slows adoption. Nearly half of managers admit they worry about losing control if oversight decreases. In some departments, proposed trials are blocked by leaders who insist on round-the-clock availability, even as staff already adjust their hours informally to fit personal needs. Making flexibility official just exposes what's already happening under the surface. Industries that refuse to adapt face real consequences. Accounting firms that stick to 5-day schedules are losing junior staff to startups with compressed weeks. New graduates actively choose flexible employers over those demanding long hours. One recent hire described leaving a well-known firm for a smaller company that offered a 4-day schedule, noting that the quality of work stayed the same while the hours dropped. Cost savings add another argument. Offices that close 1 extra day a week cut utility bills and operating expenses by up to 27%. A call center saved $400,000 annually just by shutting down on Fridays. These savings often outweigh any temporary slowdowns during the transition. Some governments are starting to encourage the shift. Belgium now offers tax breaks for companies moving to 4-day schedules, and Scotland funds pilot programs. In the U.S., efforts to pass a voluntary 32-hour workweek bill stalled after pushback from business groups. The debate centers on competitiveness, even as workers face mounting burnout and turnover. Misaligned policies can create absurd situations. At one insurance company, staff are required to work 5 days even though their clients are closed on Fridays. Employees spend slow days watching training videos just to fill the hours. In other cases, companies try to compress 40 hours into 4 days, but this often leads to fatigue and defeats the purpose. The most successful models reduce weekly hours to 32 while keeping pay constant. Unions are increasingly putting shorter work weeks on the bargaining table. The United Auto Workers have made it a key demand, and teachers' unions in several states are pushing for 4-day school weeks to address staffing shortages. These bargaining efforts reflect a broader push for work arrangements that match the realities of modern life. Customer expectations have also adapted. When a Utah bank moved to a 4-day week, clients initially complained, until the bank extended online service hours and weekend support. Satisfaction scores rose as people found new ways to access services. The strongest evidence comes from long-term studies. In the UK, companies on a 4-day schedule grew revenue 15% faster than those sticking to 5 days, and employee healthcare claims dropped by nearly a third. Health and morale improve when people actually get time to recover. Yet, most industries still default to tradition. Law firms, factories, and other time-based businesses resist change because their systems reward presence, not results. Even when workers finish the same amount of work in fewer days, management often reverts to old patterns simply to keep equipment running or maintain the appearance of activity. This resistance to new models reveals how deeply the old metrics are embedded. Until leadership is willing to measure work by output rather than hours, the 4-day week will remain rare, even as the evidence for its benefits grows. As companies hesitate, workers are increasingly taking matters into their own hands. The Union Resurgence. Union activity is rising again, but the movement looks different than in the past. Petitions for new unions have increased by 58% as workers across industries respond to economic instability and shifting job structures. This resurgence comes after decades of declining membership and reflects a renewed desire for stability and protection in a labor market that offers less of both. Digital media workers have emerged as some of the most visible organizers, forming unions that have negotiated overtime protections in an industry long known for demanding extra hours without extra pay. Journalists and content creators now receive compensation for work that was once expected for free, marking a significant change in workplace standards. New forms of organizing are taking hold. Rather than broad, industry-wide unions, micro-unions are forming around specific issues or job categories. At one tech company, contractors banded together to negotiate for better meal stipends, while gig workers in another city organized to secure more predictable schedules. These focused efforts have led to tangible wins. A rideshare driver micro-union, for example, successfully advocated for guaranteed bathroom access at local hubs. By concentrating on concrete needs, these groups can make progress where traditional unions might struggle. Despite these successes, most gig workers remain outside the reach of collective bargaining. Only 7% have any union coverage, leaving the vast majority without basic protections like minimum wage guarantees or paid leave. Legal barriers are significant. Many platforms classify workers as independent contractors, making it difficult or even risky to organize. Some delivery drivers have attempted to form unions, only to face account deactivations or legal threats from the platforms themselves. The fragmented nature of gig work, where workers are spread out, often working for multiple employers, adds another layer of difficulty. Traditional sectors still see the most consistent union gains. Healthcare workers, for example, account for a large portion of recent organizing victories, including strikes that have secured safer staffing ratios. Teachers' unions have expanded into charter schools, winning recognition and bargaining rights for faculty who previously had none. These wins show that established union models remain effective where employment relationships are clear and stable. Remote and hybrid work environments introduce new complications. Organizing across locations is harder when workers rarely meet in person. Some companies have responded to union drives by isolating organizers in separate online channels or monitoring digital communications for signs of collective action. Surveillance tools make it easier for employers to track and discourage organizing, and workers report disciplinary action for discussing pay or unionizing in monitored chat groups. Younger workers are a driving force behind the resurgence. Gen Z employees are much more likely to support unions than previous generations, seeing collective action as a practical response to stagnant wages and limited advancement. Many describe discussing pay and working conditions as a basic necessity, not a radical act. For this cohort, unionizing is often about securing a voice at work and a measure of stability in a volatile economy. Employers continue to resist. Anti-union campaigns have become more sophisticated, often involving mandatory meetings, training videos, and legal strategies to delay or disrupt organizing efforts. In some cases, companies challenge the eligibility of voters or use turnover to weaken union drives, making it harder for workers to maintain momentum. Labor law has not kept up with the evolution of work. Regulations still assume a clear, long-term employer-employee relationship, which is often absent in gig and contract work. Courts remain divided on whether platform workers can unionize, and the outcome of ongoing cases could reshape labor rights for millions. In the meantime, most gig workers lack access to the protections and bargaining power that unions can provide. Some unions are responding by offering portable benefits that travel with workers between jobs. These models appeal to freelancers and contractors who need health insurance or retirement options not tied to a single employer. For many, the ability to access group rates or pooled benefits is a strong incentive to join, even if traditional union protections remain out of reach. Despite the uptick in organizing, union membership remains low, just over 10% of the workforce. Many new unions are local or workplace-specific, rather than spanning entire industries. The challenges are significant, from legal hurdles to employer opposition, but the renewed interest in collective solutions signals that workers are actively seeking new ways to regain leverage and security. As these efforts continue, the landscape of work is also shifting in other ways, with the physical boundaries of employment and compensation being redrawn. The geography revolution. Remote work has fundamentally altered the relationship between where people live and where they work. In 2025, more than a quarter of U.S. knowledge workers are employed by companies based in a different state, untethered from the traditional requirement to be near an office. This shift has opened the door for location arbitrage, where a software engineer living in Mississippi can earn a salary set by Bay Area standards, using the difference to pay off a mortgage years ahead of schedule. For many, the ability to maximize purchasing power by earning a high wage in a low-cost region is the most tangible benefit of the geography revolution. Companies, however, are responding with pay localization. Nearly half now adjust compensation based on where employees actually live. When a marketing director relocated from New York to North Carolina, her employer cut her salary by nearly a fifth, even though her work and output remained unchanged. These policies, framed as cost of living adjustments, create frustration and resentment. Employees doing the same job as their colleagues can end up with dramatically different paychecks, simply because of their zip code. The promise of remote work as an equalizer is complicated by these new strategies for controlling labor costs. Taxation has become another battleground. As employees work across state lines, conflicting rules have created headaches for both workers and employers. Some states tax remote workers based on the company's location, not the employee's residence, leading to double taxation scenarios and confusion about withholding. Accountants report spending far more time navigating these issues than before the pandemic, and workers find themselves caught in disputes between state agencies. With only a dozen states offering clear guidance, most are left to figure it out on their own. The geography revolution is also reshaping who gets hired. Remote job postings attract more diverse applicants. Applications from women rise by 15%, and those from underrepresented minorities go up by a third. A developer in Alabama now works for a Seattle tech company that would never have considered him before. This broader reach helps companies tap into overlooked talent pools, but it also raises new questions about pay equity and opportunity if salary bands are tied to geography. Some workers have found creative ways to take advantage of the system. A project manager rents a mailbox in San Francisco while living in Thailand, collecting a coastal salary while enjoying a much lower cost of living. Others negotiate contracts that specify location-neutral pay or use relatives' addresses to secure higher compensation. These tactics reveal how workers are adapting to the new landscape, even as companies try to enforce geographic controls through IP tracking and periodic office check-ins. Environmental impacts have emerged as an unexpected benefit. Full-time remote workers produce significantly fewer emissions than their office-based peers, and national traffic volumes have dropped as fewer people commute each day. Urban planners note that the migration away from expensive cities is reshaping communities. Downtown vacancies are up, while rural broadband subscriptions have surged. The shift is not just about individual choices, but about the transformation of entire regions. The economic impact is clear in both directions. Small towns see remote workers driving up housing prices, sometimes outbidding local teachers and nurses. Meanwhile, major city business districts face declining revenue as fewer people commute and spend money downtown. Transit systems, designed for a different era, now run below capacity, and city budgets are strained by the loss of commuter-driven tax revenue. Despite these shifts, many industries resist change. Law firms still require junior attorneys to be in the office, while senior partners work from wherever they please. Investment banks are among the most vocal opponents of remote work. But even there, some employees quietly split their time between city offices and rural cabins, careful not to miss key meetings. Policy has yet to catch up with reality. Most labor laws still assume a physical workplace, and few states have adapted tax codes or employment rules to address the complexities of remote work. This legal uncertainty leaves both workers and employers navigating a patchwork of conflicting regulations, with little clarity on rights and responsibilities. Perhaps the most lasting change is psychological. Workers increasingly see location as a negotiable factor, not a fixed constraint. Many now refuse in-person offers that don't match the flexibility or pay of remote roles. This mindset is reshaping expectations, with most remote-capable employees demanding continued location flexibility. Companies that adapt quickly attract talent from unexpected places, while those clinging to old assumptions find themselves left behind. As the boundaries of work become more fluid, the way people present themselves and build credibility is also changing. The traditional markers of career success are giving way to new forms of visibility personal brand and influence. Today, a strong personal brand is no longer optional. It's become the default currency for career advancement and job security. As hiring managers increasingly turn to platforms like LinkedIn to evaluate candidates, the traditional resume has lost its central role. A growing number of professionals now build their reputations through online portfolios, social media engagement, and public case studies, often attracting job offers before even submitting an application. A graphic designer in Austin, for instance, found her client base through TikTok videos that showcase her creative process, drawing more attention than local agencies and opening doors that a degree or paper resume could not. Maintaining a visible online presence is now a regular part of professional life. Workers spend an average of 6.4 hours each week curating their digital profiles, posting industry insights, and engaging with their networks. This investment is ongoing. One marketing manager updates his LinkedIn daily, not just for job hunting, but to remain relevant in a field where visibility leads to opportunity. Regular activity pays off. Profiles with consistent engagement receive far more recruiter outreach than those left static. The shift is clear. Being seen is often as important as being skilled. The breakdown of traditional career paths has only accelerated this trend. Instead of climbing a single company ladder, professionals now assemble portfolios of visible achievements and skills. A financial analyst documents every successful project publicly, ensuring that when layoffs come, his expertise is evident to potential employers. This approach is a safeguard in a job market where internal loyalty no longer guarantees stability or advancement. Freelancers and gig workers feel this imperative even more strongly. Without the backing of a well-known employer, their reputation depends entirely on personal visibility. A copywriter, for example, chose to turn down full-time employment to focus on her growing Substack audience and LinkedIn following, assets that she controls, independent of any organization. Younger professionals, in particular, see personal branding as a form of portable equity, preferring control over their own opportunities rather than relying on company promises. The rise of AI-driven hiring systems adds another layer to the challenge. Automated screening tools now scan online profiles for keywords and relevant experience, making it necessary to optimize content for both human and machine audiences. One engineer spends hours updating his GitHub and LinkedIn to align with what algorithms prioritize, knowing that recruiters often rely on AI to filter candidates before any human review. This dual audience increases the complexity and time commitment required to stay competitive. An always job-seeking mindset has emerged. Even those satisfied in their current roles keep their profiles updated and actively network, aware that opportunities can appear or disappear at any moment. One project manager schedules regular conversations with recruiters, using these interactions to gauge her market value and negotiate better terms with her current employer when needed. The expectation of long-term loyalty has faded. Adaptability and self-marketing have taken its place. This shift creates new barriers. Workers who aren't comfortable sharing their work publicly, or who lack digital skills, risk falling behind. A factory supervisor, for example, struggled to translate decades of hands-on experience into compelling online content, extending his job search far longer than peers who were more digitally fluent. The emphasis on personal branding favors extroverts and those willing to self-promote, while introverts and those in traditionally discreet fields may find themselves overlooked despite strong qualifications. Some organizations attempt to resist the trend, restricting employees' public profiles, or controlling what can be shared online. These policies often backfire, driving talent to competitors that encourage individual visibility. Companies that fail to adapt risk losing out on candidates who understand the new rules of career advancement. The result is clear. Personal branding has replaced organizational loyalty as the main driver of career mobility. Professionals with strong online presences move more freely between roles, attract better offers, and maintain a sense of security that comes from their own networks and reputations rather than any single employer. The ability to communicate expertise, document achievements, and remain visible is now as important as technical skill itself. This constant self-promotion is not without cost. Many workers describe fatigue from maintaining multiple platforms and the pressure to stay always on. Yet, in a market defined by uncertainty and rapid change, the personal brand imperative is here to stay. For those willing to adapt, it offers a measure of control and resilience. For others, it introduces new challenges that the old system never addressed. As the demands of work continue to evolve, the conversation is shifting toward what real solutions might look like, models and policies that address the underlying problems rather than just their symptoms. The path forward. Real change in the world of work will not come from waiting for a single fix. The most promising solutions are already in use, just not widely adopted. Task-based pay models, which compensate workers for what they actually deliver rather than the hours they log, have led to higher satisfaction and more engagement. In practice, this means employees set their own schedules, focusing on periods of peak productivity and being paid for completed projects instead of time spent at a desk. One consulting firm gives its staff the power to choose when and how they work and to set rates based on the value they provide. Projects finish faster, clients pay for results, and workers report lower stress. Still, most companies cling to outdated time tracking, even for roles where output matters more than presence. Countries with robust social safety nets offer another clear example of what's possible. Workers in these nations experience significantly less job-related stress, largely because healthcare, retirement, and essential protections aren't tied to a single employer. The security of knowing that a job loss doesn't mean losing access to medical care or basic income lets people focus on their work rather than survival. Meanwhile, U.S. policy continues to lag, with lawmakers stuck in debates over structures that no longer reflect how people actually work. The gig economy now accounts for more than a third of the workforce, yet most gig workers have little access to benefits or legal protections. The rapid expansion of gig and project-based work shows both the potential and the pitfalls of new models. By 2025, nearly half of U.S. workers will participate in some form of gig work. This shift offers flexibility and variety, but often at the cost of stability. Some companies are experimenting with hybrid staffing models, blending a lean core of permanent employees with a flexible network of specialized contractors. A tech firm might keep a small team on payroll while bringing in hundreds of contractors as needed, allowing for agility without the risk of overcommitting resources. Workers gain exposure to a range of projects without being left entirely on their own. Highly skilled gig work challenges the idea that only entry-level or low-wage jobs can be project-based. IT consultants, healthcare specialists, and marketing experts increasingly operate as independent contractors, often earning more and working fewer hours than in traditional employment. One financial analyst moved from a salaried role to freelance, seeing a significant pay increase and greater control over her time. This demonstrates that task-based compensation works at every level, not just for routine or manual labor. Remote work and global hiring are further breaking down the old boundaries. Companies now recruit talent from anywhere, assembling teams that span continents and time zones. Some pay local adjusted salaries, while others maintain uniform rates regardless of geography. Workers are using this flexibility to their advantage, relocating to lower-cost areas or negotiating for location-neutral pay. The result is a workforce that is more distributed, but also more fragmented, one where opportunity can depend as much on negotiation skills as on technical ability. The 4-day workweek stands out as a practical experiment with measurable results. Companies that have moved to shorter schedules report equal or higher productivity and lower burnout. Employees reclaim time lost to commuting and unnecessary meetings, while businesses see reduced turnover and healthcare costs. Still, only a small fraction of organizations have made this shift, even as evidence mounts that it works. Unions are adapting as well, focusing on targeted issues rather than broad, traditional bargaining. Micro-unions form to address specific needs, like guaranteed minimum pay for gig drivers or remote work provisions for teachers. These efforts succeed in places where old models fall short, showing that collective action can still drive change even in a fragmented labor market. The cost of maintaining outdated systems is high, both in lost productivity and in worker stress. Current models waste billions each year on inefficiency and turnover, while the gig economy contributes over $1 trillion to the economy despite its instability. The math is clear. The status quo is expensive, and alternatives are already proving more effective. Policy remains the main obstacle. Labor laws still assume stable, long-term employment, and benefits remain tied to traditional jobs. Few states have adapted to the realities of remote work or portable benefits. The tools for progress, task-based, pay, flexible schedules, portable safety nets, are known, but implementation lags behind. Moving forward means choosing to build systems that fit the workforce as it is, not as it was. The direction of work is changing, shaped by those who refuse to accept outdated models. The consequences of holding on to the past are already visible, and the pressure for new approaches is only growing. As work continues to evolve, the traditional 9-to-5 model is losing its grip, not through gradual decline, but as a result of its failure to meet the realities of today's workforce. More workers now treat employment as a portfolio, combining multiple roles or income streams to stay afloat. The share of Americans holding more than one job has reached its highest sustained rate since 2009, while a quarter of employees work remotely at least part-time. Despite this, companies still cling to outdated office requirements for jobs that could be done anywhere. Automation and AI are accelerating the shift, cutting routine tasks and leading 41% of firms to anticipate workforce reductions. The real challenge isn't just that old models are disappearing, it's that new ones aren't ready to replace them. With wage growth stalled and benefits eroding, workers are left to navigate a landscape where security is scarce and the rules keep changing. The future of work will depend on how quickly both organizations and policymakers adapt to these new realities, rather than hoping the old system will somehow recover.